My name is Freddie Nash, a media detective. I work in a very niche market, solving ghost stories. The man driving is Mr. Yamasaki. He's my assistant, and he doesn't like mornings. Most people don't believe in ghosts, spirits, or poltergeists, so when they see one, they want answers. That's what I can do.
That was from Half Dead Fred, starring my friend Corin Nemec, who's here, my guest on It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack. My old son from the show Parker Lewis. Can't lose that job, boy. I just because at the time it was what got me to Santa Barbara. I think I told you this when we worked on Kirby Buckets, which was very nice of him to come in. They were looking for another version of Kirby Buckets in a different dimension, and they needed somebody older. And I said, I think maybe Corin Nemec would do it. And they were like, really? I said, I'll find out. Anyway, that was fun.
That was great.
But
I was the older Kirby Buckets. It could have been better casting.
And that's, the reason why I loved that show, Kirby Buckets. They were really nice people to work with. The hours were pretty good because they were all kids involved. So, you got to get these kids shot out early. But also, when I met with the writers, the head writers, I said, this is Parker Lewis. This show is the closest thing I've seen to Parker Lewis since Parker Lewis. So I had a soft spot to it. But anyway, Parker Lewis got me to move to Santa Barbara. I said to my wife, because I was getting paid like series money, not big, huge series money, but series money. And I only worked 1 or 2 days a week. It was the best job. And I said to her, it's never going to be like this again. Like, it's never going to be this easy and this lucrative at the same time. We got to go right now. Like, let's go. And we unloaded the house in LA and moved to Santa Barbara with the kids. And once I got there, it's like, I don't know, somehow I've made it work. But anyway, Corin Nemec, thank you so much again for being here. So let's quickly talk about Half Dead Fred. And then I want to get into Venice High. So that movie, Half Dead Fred, also Jason London from Dazed and Confused. You guys are good buddies, right? Is that true?
Yeah. Me and Jason and I have known each other since the early '90s. We had the same kind of social circles back then. The film and TV world was so much smaller at that time, and I can only imagine what it must have been like in, say, the 40s and 50s. How much even smaller it must have been then. The mystery and the intrigue of it all is just gone. It's scattered to the winds in 1,000 pieces now. But the 80s and 90s still had a really great hangover of the classic Hollywood era, the places, the hangouts, the haunts. And so me and him were buddies. And I brought him on because I am good friends with Braun Theron, the writer director of Half Dead Fred. Huh? And he and I are friends really from the graffiti scene. Both of us have been graffiti artists since we were kids.
That's a big part of the book, Venice High, which we're going to talk about.
Yes, the Venice High thing. It's a perfect segue into that because that's really how I got involved with Half Dead Fred. I'd done some other stuff with my buddy Braun, and our primary kind of interests at first was just the fact that we both were graffiti heads. And then secondarily, we were both into film and television. So it became of interest to both of us to try and get something off the ground together. We did a couple of like little pilot episodes for some graffiti type shows and things like that. And I came and did some work for him on a couple of small projects he was getting off the ground. Heat of the Beat, a web series he was trying to do. They did, and went and did a part in that for him. And so when this came up, he was doing his first online fundraiser and all of that, and I made a really, really fair deal with him to come on board and play the lead for him in the film, which really helped him to raise the amount of money that he needed to make it, which if I think all in his budget was only somewhere between like maybe 40 and 60 grand or something like that. I don't know, because I didn't stay on board as a producer for it. No, it was a total skeleton crew on this.
Oh my God.
On this film, and all the actors were all working just purely out of passion, doing modified low budget rates and all of that. And we even had a decent shooting schedule. I mean, it was very tough. I mean, all free locations. Obviously, the city of Flint, Michigan, was very welcoming,
That was
and
my
so we didn't have to pay for anything in that respect, or they didn't have to pay for anything in that respect. And they got some great deals on local B&Bs with people there that they knew through one of the producers that was local, and they got really fair shakes on the rental for a crew from out of town and all of that. So, I'm not sure what ultimately the final budget was, but I know that it was well under 100,000.
Wow, good for them. Good for you. Good for them.
Yeah, and it turned out good. I mean,
Yeah, and it's on TV, and you can watch it. It's great. You made a movie.
Yeah. It's a great success for him, and I'm happy for him. He's working on another film now that I'm not a part of, but I'm hoping for great success for him on that as well.
So let's talk about your book, Venice High, which is available on Amazon. Although I think I looked last night, there's only one copy left. I really enjoyed that book. I enjoyed it for a lot of reasons. Part of it was because you wrote it. My son wrote it. But part of it is it's very nostalgic. I find it to be very nostalgic for a time in LA that, you were sort of just talking about. It was sort of the end of the old, and, and graffiti art was part of that. So
yeah,
what was the inspiration for the book? I'm making things up.
The inspiration for the book was what my life experience. See, I lived a dual life growing up because I was a child actor, but in real life, I was a graffiti artist and a tagger and a skateboarder, and that's the kind of guys that I hung out with. So, in terms of actors that I hung out with when I was young, David Arquette and I were good friends, and Balthazar Getty and I were good friends, and like Seth Benzer, who's the lead singer from the band Crazy Town, Shifty, from Crazy Town, and Yeshi Pearl, who's Mickey Avalon, and Justin Warfield from She Wants Revenge, the lead singer. All of us were very, very close because we were all into graffiti together, but we were also into the arts and entertainment world, and it was an interesting combination. But for me, my experience in high school was this one of like, living down in the valley and knowing all these girls at like Westlake School for Girls and, Beverly Hills High and all this, and me and all my like skate rat, graffiti homies, like going to these bougie parties in Beverly Hills and getting in beef with the rich dudes there and stuff. Right. And them not wanting us there because, we got more swag than them, but just no money, and I was making money at the time as an actor, but that wasn't my thing. I was happy acting because it made me feel good and it was my passion, but it wasn't my life,
right.
which probably if I had probably embraced more of the lifestyle of being an actor, my career may have been a lot bigger than it has been. But at a certain point, there's just a real bad flavor in my mouth of what it is to have to go and promote yourself.
No, I have to say, I don't remember you. Here's a couple of things I remember from that time and you were a kid, you were 20, maybe, I don't know, but I don't remember you like the Hollywood party scene was not going on. I remember you being much more into music. You had a car, you had speakers put in the back of the car.
The Alfa Romeo
could blow up a country like this. Speakers, you want to torment the terrorists, just put them in Corin's car and blare some music. But that's what I remember. I don't remember you like in the Hollywood scene, and I knew you were into graffiti art, but I didn't realize how much. Venice High, and I'm sort of intrigued by that.
Yeah, that was the impetus.
Yeah. But
was that experience in high school?
Yeah, and David Arquette, who's a friend who was on Son of the Beach, and he had a posse of taggers, and he brought them on for those episodes of Son of the Beach that he did, and those guys were really funny, but they really sort of look back on that time in a romantic time. Now, from an outsider's point of view, they don't appreciate the graffiti art that a lot of people just see graffiti, and you guys, there was an art to it, but there was also a sense of kind of danger and adventure, correct?
That's where the addiction comes in. And there's a couple of things. There's two things that factored into it for me. I got into it because I was a break dancer when I was really young, and I had my breakdancing name Kid Cruz when I was like 10 years old, and I'd do little bubble letters that said Kid Cruz. And by the time I moved to LA when I was 11 going on 12, well, breakdancing was kind of out of fad by then. Nobody was really laying down cardboard on the street corners anymore. They were picking up skateboards and spray cans. And so when I moved from Atlanta to LA, I was still into the graffiti part of it. And some kids that I was in school with were like they were well known. This guy Vision and Spy 1000, and their style of graffiti art was next level. And I was like, I have to do that. So I started learning right away. And when I went out, the adrenaline rush of going out and putting up some art somewhere, or even catching your name, a tag or whatever on something, that adrenaline rush is one thing. But then the after effect is like when you're on like a bus or an RTD with a friend or this, that, or you're in the back seat of your mom's car driving down the freeway or something, and you kind of look over and see your name up there on the wall and nobody knows. It's like you know what I mean?
Right.
It was like this kind of secret club, type of mentality about it. A lot of the guys that I knew that were some of the more well-known artists, you would never really suspect them when you saw them in real life. There was this guy in my graffiti crew, the Chosen Few, named Rage, and he had this whole technique of dressing up like he was going to the disco when he'd go out tagging, so that when he's walking down the street, he'd have like a spray can stuffed up inside of his like really nice sweater, so you couldn't see it. But he'd have running shoes on, but he'd have nice slacks on, a nice shirt, a sweater, hair all slicked back, so that if the cop drive by, they're like, "Oh, that guy's up. He's definitely not up to anything."
He's not,
you know. So like our whole crew would like go out all dressed up, all nice and stuff. We didn't come back dressed up very nice sometimes, but
hey, have you thought about, this seems like just such a great world. Have you ever thought about turning, is there a movie script for Venice High? Or, because what you're talking to me about right now, like kids from the Valley tagging, meeting girls at Westlake School, and all the music back then, that sounds like a recipe for a fun movie.
Yes, well, it originally started out as I was developing it as a series. I even shot like a little. I might even still be on YouTube. Years ago, maybe in the early 2000s, I shot like just a little clip from a pilot script that I had developed, and I created an entire pitch deck for it, everything, all this stuff. And then and I just couldn't get it's very difficult. I think you may know, when you in Hollywood is kind of a closed door system. It's like until you prove yourself outside of the box that you're in, a lot of people don't really want to hear from you.
Yeah, but that seems like a really, really fun world.
Well, so that's why I wrote the book, because I was like, I want to put the story out. I don't care how I do it. It's a great story. It's a romance. It's Romeo and Juliet, in the graffiti scene in LA in the 90s. And I think that I think it would go over great as either a feature or a series, for sure. And I ended up, because I wrote the book, it ended up being read by an agent at CAA, who unfortunately had to leave there during the Me Too movement, thing. He got Me Too'd out of there,
Yeah.
But and so did my project. So it ended up getting picked up over at CAA and being developed over there. And I ended up developing a whole new pitch deck package for it. We were about to take it out, and then he got taken out. And so I was back to square one. But still, I love the story, and I'm just glad that you read it.
Really great. You can find it on Amazon. It's under your real name, which is Joseph C. Nemec IV.
Yeah, that was probably a dumb move on my part. I tried to go back and change it, but once it's published, you can't.
Yeah.
So it says Corin Nemec on the actual cover itself, but listed under Joseph C. Nemec IV. And then I also have on Lulu.com as well, if you look up Corin Nemec, I have a whole bunch of screenplays that I've published just for fun, as well as 3 books of poetry. Cool. And several books of photography too.
Unbelievable! You are a very prolific child that I did not raise. Okay, we're going to take our final break, I'm talking to Corin Nemec. He's got so much stuff to promote, but check him out on Twitter. I'm Corin Nemec. I am Corin Nemec. You can check
The
him out.
letter I and the letter M.
The letter I, the letter M. He's got Half Dead Fred's on Tubi. This movie, this Western, I'm gonna watch it tonight. Dead Man's Hand. I can't wait.
You're gonna love it.
He's got anyway. He's just a very prolific guy and an old friend. And we're gonna talk to him some more right after this break. You're listening to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack.
Excellent. Some good stuff. All right, here we go. Final segment.
What time is it? Game time. 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 When the game began, I worked all summer to be a champion. At Venice High School, all we do is win. Man, it feels good to be a.
That's the fight song for Venice High School.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's what I saw it on YouTube. It said Venice High, and I think that's like their football song, Venice High. So we're talking about the book, so I thought I'd play that.
My goodness, I wouldn't want to play against them. Coming out to that.
No. So again, I just love that. I love that world. I'm remembering a few things. I want to go back and talk about Parker Lewis a little bit. I was remembering that you were one of a couple music things about that show. I don't think I really had heard, because I'm old, and I was old then too, certainly old for that show. I had never really heard hip hop music, or maybe I had, but I didn't really listen to it till you got into it really early. Am I right?
Well, like I said, I was breakdancing when I was, around 9, 10 years old in Atlanta, Georgia, growing up there. So the original advent of hip hop was part of my culture,
right?
Growing up because of the breakdancing. They call it, we're in excuse me, in the hip hop movement, it's called the 5 pillars of hip hop. And you try to, as a hip hop head, you try to represent all 5 pillars. It's the rap style, the clothing style, the DJing, the graffiti style, and the dancing. And so the one thing I never really was able to really get even close to mastering was the DJing. But I had my clothing style hip hopped out. I could rap, I could freestyle rap, I could do the graffiti art and all that, but so that was kind of like part of my whole culture for sure. And it bled into Parker Lewis, the style that of clothing and everything came out of that. If you look at Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, or any of the hip hop kind of like the Kid and Play, for instance, another good one. MC Hammer, another good one. That clothing style was Parker Lewis,
right?
The dress style pants with the high top shoes, the fancy shirts buttoned all the way up with my high top fade, my white boy cracker version of a high top fade, the Gumby.
Yeah, but it was really, again, there was an artistic flair to that show that other shows didn't have. And part of it was your look. Absolutely. Was that hair and those clothes. And it's what part of what attracted people to it. The other thing I remember musically from that show was Abe Ben-Ruby, who played Kubiak on the show, the big guy.
Yeah, man. Still very close with him.
Yes, I know you are. And I remember one day, he's playing some music, and I'm trying to stay hip to, I got 2 kids. I'm trying to stay hip to what young people are listening to. And he said, hey, Tim, I got this band. I found this album came out. It's really, really good. You want to hear it? And I said, yeah, sure. And he plays it, and it was Nirvana. And I remember saying to myself, I'm being polite. And as I'm walking away, I say to myself, well, that's never going to work.
He must have played the first album.
No, it's just how unhip I am that I said to myself. I said the same.
Well, I don't know. I wasn't there for their very first album was more punk rock, and not so much grunge. And I wasn't a big fan of their first album.
This was the one with the baby,
Butthole Surfers,
Yeah, I actually like some of that stuff, but I'm a big fan of the Offspring. You still like the Offspring at all?
I'm not that familiar, but I've heard the name.
They're like a 90s band. They kind of remind me, like, if there was a soundtrack to Venice High, you would absolutely have the Offspring on that soundtrack. But I was going to say the other time I said something really stupid, like Nirvana is never going to go anywhere, was I did an interview for Son of the Beach, I think, or maybe Nightstand. I went on Bill O'Reilly's show on Fox, and the Fox network had just started. And I finished the interview. He was, he's a lunatic. He's not a bad lunatic. And I walk out on 6th Avenue and I look back at Fox News because they had just come on the air. And I looked up and I said, well, that's never going to work.
Hey, man,
I
hope you say that. I hope you say that about me after this
interview.
I'll be assured to blow up.
Oh, man, that movie, that Dead Man's Hand, that's going nowhere. $100 million. Another thing I wanted to talk about Parker Lewis and get your take on was because you were a child actor, and I asked you this in an email. Let's deal with this one first. Was, when I was trying to be an actor, I had jobs as a waiter or, whatever. And you sort of skipped that because you were a successful actor this whole time. Was there, like, if you hadn't done that, was there a job you would have done to make money to support your creative end?
Well, both my parents were in the arts and entertainment business. My mom was a graphic designer in the music and theater business,
right,
doing poster design and music poster design and some album covers. She worked at Capitol Records for a while as well. And my dad is a production designer, was a set designer back in the day. Joe Nemec III, who did T2, Patriot Games, Twister, The Saint, The Shadow, The Abyss, was a assistant art director on Goonies, was on and on and on. So in all likelihood, because I was into graffiti art anyway, I probably would have gone into some type of arts in that direction.
Sounds like
design, some type of design or something, whether it be advertising or maybe even my own type of just sort of like how Obey did, maybe even doing my own type of stuff in that direction.
I didn't realize
try
both
to do
parents
for a while, but
I knew your dad was in. I didn't realize they were both so creative on the artistic side. I knew your dad was in, and he was, an IATSE guy, but I didn't know he was so creative. Good for them. Here's the other thing I wanted, Parker Lewis, was because you're a child actor. One of the things I noticed when we all got together to do the DVD commentary, and a lot of you had not, some of you stay in contact, some of these guys you stay in contact with all the time, but a lot of people hadn't seen each other in 10 years, maybe. And it's sort of like a child actor's version of a high school reunion.
Yeah.
It was kind of strange to watch this. I went to normal high school and high school reunions and all that. But for you guys, you sort of grew up together on this show. And it was interesting. It was like watching a high school reunion.
Yeah. That was interesting. I mean, the best time I had, I wasn't in the best shape that I had. One of my close friends, his birthday was the night before we had to go down and do that whole thing.
Yeah.
And I had showed up a shell of my former self the day before, but I pushed through it as we must.
You're a professional.
But we actually did one of the big conventions, Paris Manga, which is a really big convention over in France. If it hasn't been burned down yet, but it's a really big show in France that I've done a number of times, and they did a Parker Lewis reunion over there, and they brought me. I'll just give the character names. They brought Parker, Kubiak, Mikey, Jerry, and Shelley.
Yeah.
So and we all went over there and just had. I think we were there for five or 6 days together, all in the same hotel and all of that, and just. I mean, it was a blast. It was a blast. And let me tell you something, it's kind of easy to sort of slide undercover, when you're out and about traveling as an actor. Even though I've done a lot of stuff, I'm still, that cusp of like most people think they went to high school with me or they knew me from college at first, you know.
I used to,
but
I don't get it anymore, but I know that look.
but that said, walking around with Kubiak, there was no hiding from anybody.
That's funny.
And in France, it was hilarious. I mean, people were stopping us everywhere. Kubiak, you know.
That's funny. And we should mention that Troy Slayton, who played Jerry on the show, is now a judge. Like, he's a legitimate judge. I remember when back then he was maybe, I don't know what he was, 14 years old or something. And if there were overtime questions or like, I would ask him, like he knew everything about production. I had 2 kids and I'm going to this 14-year-old kid. Hey, Troy, do we get overtime? Overtime, you get 8 hours if you're here. And if you have an hour meal penalty, and he knew everything. It was so funny. Well, of course.
Yeah. The only thing he didn't know was his freaking lines half the time.
That's funny. We got to wrap things up. This was really, really great. Corin, thanks so much. Always great to see you. I hope we see each other in person.
You as well, my friend. Well, I am going to do that. I am doing that little surprise skit here that I'm working on. I actually shot the first thing for it the other day for this little Parker Lewis gym that I'm working on for people out there. That
the one we talked about.
Hitting Tim up for something here.
Okay, great.
So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Great. I can't wait. So there's so much to promote. Go to Twitter. I'm Corin Nemec. Go to Instagram. Right now, you can watch his movie Dead Man's Hand on video on demand. But Half Dead Fred is out there. Buy the book Venice High. Corin Nemec, and congratulations, you just got engaged. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you. Yes, I have the best babe ever. Sabrina is my match made in heaven.
That's great. That's great, man. Thank you so much. Been talking to Corin Nemec. Catch me next time on Dr. D, Richard Dugan, our producer, Jeremiah Higgins, our big time producer, and we'll see you next time on It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack.
Exit stage left, even.
How do you remember that show? I know you do.